They stood as high as a 6-story building, weighed more than a fully loaded city bus, lived as long as 300 years. Contrary to the roles Hollywood assigned them, they were the most vital, intelligent, and highly developed creatures the world had ever seen, and they ruled for 140 million years. And then they vanished. Long before the time of the earliest humans, the dinosaurs had disappeared as completely as though they had never lived. What killed the dinosaurs? Were they just the first examples of planned obsolescence? Could they have been the victims of extraterrestrial forces killed by a blow from outer space? Could the death of the ruling race of dinosaurs, now 65 million years in the past, contain a warning for another ruling race, our human race, about our own future? After all, the dinosaur struggle for survival couldn't have anything to do with modern problems, things like nuclear winter, the greenhouse effect, or acid rain. Could it? Or were there survivors of the great dying, survivors of the dinosaurs, living among us? Dinosaurs hold a special magnetism for children. Perhaps children can believe what the rest of us can barely imagine. These huge beasts, the likes of which no one has ever seen, once walked the earth and ruled it. What is there in us that responds to the dinosaurs? These beasts we've never seen, know only from their bones.
We've got company.
Their magnetism has been as strong at the movies as at the museum. Some have taken a few liberties with paleontological precepts and with their audience's credulity. Dinosaurs are so popular, so compelling, that you might think that if they hadn't existed, we would have had to invent them. Well, we did invent them 5,000 years before we knew they existed, and we called them dragons. Following the dragon's spoor through history and prehistory takes us, one scholar said, backward and backward to the very beginning of human philosophy. It is perhaps the most antique product of human imagination, and it stalks picturesque and portentous through medieval legend. St. George slew a dragon, so did Beowulf and Siegfried. They knew the dragon in Crete and Phoenicia, in Sinai and Yemen and the Red Sea, on the islands of the South Pacific, the East Indies, Australia, and Mexico. They knew the dragon well in ancient China and in the cradle of civilization, Babylon and Mesopotamia. They knew him in the Bible, the book of Revelation, chapter 12, verse 7. There was war in heaven, and the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan. The last dinosaur was dead at least 60 million years before the earliest human was born. How could the dragon, a product of human imagination, have looked so much like the real-life but long-dead dinosaur? And why have both so captured our own imagination? Perhaps it is because the dragon and the dinosaur share a common lineage, the family of reptiles, known and instinctively feared throughout history. They shared the reptilian head, the scaly-looking hide, the arm-like front legs, the stupendous bulk, and the aspect of having come from another, more forbidding world than any we know. Come with us back to the world of the dinosaurs. A world created by paleoartist contributors to the Dinosaurs Past and Present exhibit, which came to the Smithsonian. And bring your imagination. A voyage to the world of the dinosaurs, booked on a vessel, fueled by science and imagination, is a voyage to a different time and a different world. A different time. Think of the time since the dinosaurs lived more than 200 million years ago, as if it were a single year. Today would be New Year's Eve, 12 midnight, on the last day of the year. It was January 1 when the first dinosaurs appeared on the earth. They roamed and ruled the world most of the year, until September 13th, when they vanished. Not until December 12th did our earliest ancestors, the great apes, appear. And not until December 30th at 2 in the afternoon did early humans make their entry. Neanderthal man came on December 31st at 10 till 10 at night. The Ice Age ended at 11 till 12. And O.C. Marsh dug his first dinosaur with just 15 seconds left in the year. And it was a different world. There was no ice at the North or South Poles. North America, Europe, and Asia were still connected when the dinosaurs came. The American West, the arid west of Martian Cope, was a subtropical basin, not far inland from the warm, shallow sea, which covered what is now the Great Plains. Look at that different world the dinosaurs knew. It is a brown and green world, for there were no flowers to greet the dinosaurs. And listen, you'll hear insects, 30-inch dragonflies, foot-long cockroaches, and 2/3 of the species of insects we know today. But no birds, for there were none when the dinosaurs came. What would become the desert Southwest in about 200 million years was populated by creatures that mounted a fearsome-looking arsenal of plates, spikes, and armor. But all their weaponry and heft were no more than the best offense, a good defense, against the deceptively slim and graceful predator Coelophysis. Just 6 feet long, including 3 feet of tail, and weighing no more than 100 pounds. Coelophysis could never have won a frontal attack against its much larger prey. But the weight of the grazing herbivores became a liability when pursued by the speedy and long-legged Coelophysis. And a complicated set of jaw muscles and serrated teeth could open wounds from which a stronger adversary would bleed to death. The skies belonged to the pterosaurs. With wingspans ranging from a few inches to 60 feet, the pterosaur had wings like a bat's, but it was a reptile, not a mammal like the bat. And it lived off fish it plucked from the ocean, like a pelican. But unlike the pelican, it had no feathers. Then and now it was unique and unchallenged in the air. For sheer size and bulk, no animal that walked the earth ever rivaled the giant sauropods, Diplodocus, Brontosaurus, Mamenchosaurus, and the rest. They grew to over 60 feet in length, over 50 tons in weight. The name Brontosaurus means thunder lizard, but the sauropods were peaceful creatures whose only defenses were whip-like tails and the force that massive bulk on huge hooves could deliver. Often, against the great predators, it was not enough. Long necks and a taste for vegetation at a rate of about half a ton a day led Diplodocus and Brontosaurus to forage among treetop foliage. About 60 million years later, another herbivore took a more down-to-earth approach. At almost 10 tons, with a skull as much as 8 feet across, Triceratops had the strength to bring down a willow or magnolia tree, and the appetite to put it away. Triceratops was also living proof that a vegetarian diet did not always breed a peaceful dinosaur. Triceratops was built to take care of itself. Over each eye, a 4-foot-long horn. A third horn grew above a powerful beak, like a giant snapping turtle's, covered by an organic substance which kept it sharp. Protecting its powerful neck, an armored collar of bone covered by tough, horny skin. At speeds of 20, 30, maybe even 40 miles an hour, no land animal ever born could take the charge of Triceratops at full gallop, including Tyrannosaurus rex. Dead 65 million years, T-Rex's reputation precedes it. In life, its ancestors preceded it, including some unlikely forebears, dating back from the delicate and bird-like Coelophysis, 6 feet and 100 pounds, through Megalosaurus, 30 million years later, a 30-foot, 1-ton predator. Through the Allosaur, up to 40 feet and 4 tons. To Tyrannosaurus, 20 feet and 5 tons of fully evolved speed, strength, and predatory belligerence. As the product of more than 100 million years of evolution, the Tyrannosaur was one of the deadliest predators the world has ever known. Close-set, forward-facing eyes gave Tyrannosaur something earlier predators had lacked: depth perception. Thin, muscular, lizard-like lips pulled the Tyrannosaur's face into what looked like a sneer, bearing gigantic teeth. Its shortened torso and slender limbs made it graceful and fast. Dinosaurs like the amphibian duck-billed hadrosaurs were 20 feet high and 3 tons, but they were virtually defenseless against T-Rex. But in Triceratops, the Tyrannosaur found his match: speed, size, and savagery against thick armor and dangerous horns. The scene has been portrayed hundreds of times, but it remains thrilling, Bakker has written. It's somehow fitting that these two massive antagonists lived out their co-evolutionary belligerence through the very last days of the very last epoch of the Age of Dinosaurs. The Dinosaurs Past and Present exhibit was a showcase for a different kind of artist. Artists who paint what neither they nor anyone else has ever seen. One of the best of the dinosaur artists, Eleanor Kish, the creator of a remarkable alloy of science and art, has come to the Smithsonian to create her next masterpiece, a new mural for the Museum of Natural History.
I've got this 150-foot mural that I've got to do, and the scientists have given me the pictures of the bones. They've showed me throughout the museum where the bones are, and I could measure them. And being that I don't trust other people's work that I can copy outright, so I've got to work with the bones myself, right down to accurate bone measurements. And once I get all these models done, they're being done to scale 1.5 inches to 1 foot. and I'm going to pose these creatures all in a row in exactly the positions we want. We want some of them diving down to eat the other. It's all eat and be eaten in that world under the sea. And when I get this all laid out, then I'll be capable of doing my pencil drawing from that. From there, I go into an 1.5-inch scale painting of the mural exactly the way it's going to be painted. And from this, then I enlarge that 1.5 to 1 foot onto the wall and begin my painting process. And that should take me approximately 2 years, I've judged.
The dinosaurs have not always looked so active to us as Eleanor Kish depicts them. Early dinosaur artists saw them as sluggish, almost inert, like the slow-moving, cold-blooded reptiles which took their body heat from the environment around them. But today there's a new picture, an active, fast-moving dinosaur, aggressive, wide-ranging, like the warm-blooded mammals and birds which keep their body heat high by quick movement and voracious appetite. It's a picture that owes much to the work of Robert Bacher, a Colorado paleontologist and no mean artist himself.
I try to approach a dinosaur as if I'd never heard of it before. Make no assumptions. Come up to Brontosaurus and you look at it, and you watch it. You watch it move. That is, you go to the joints and the ligaments and muscles, and give it a kick. What sort of speed are you going to get out of that? And look at the footprints. What sort of speed were they cruising at? And cut the bones. How fast were they growing? Make no assumptions. That's the best way to approach an unknown animal. Sort of experiment with it. And I started doing that in 1965 as an undergrad at Yale. And every time I gave dinosaurs a kick, experimented with them, they would run away like warm-blooded animals. Or they'd grow really fast like warm-blooded animals. Or they'd colonize the far north like warm-blooded animals. So I'm very conservative. I call them the way I see them. You know, I mean, if it walks like a duck, and looks like a duck, and smells like a duck, it's a duck. I mean, if it grows like a warm blood and runs like a warm blood, and its bone structure looks like a warm blood, hey, I'm going to call it a warm blood.
Smithsonian Senior Curator Nicholas Houghton watches over a dinosaur collection so authoritative that other museums often consult it to verify their own identifications. And after 30 years at the Smithsonian, Nick Houghton is something of a dinosaur authority himself.
I agree with Bacher to the extent that they were not sluggish. The footprints show quite clearly that they were very active, and with their hind legs underneath them, with their hind legs underneath them, or all fours underneath them, they had to remain active in the way that birds and mammals remain active. I think that their motion was more consonant with their size. Most of them were quite large, and like an elephant, he can get around as fast as he has to, and that's the type of locomotion that you had for most dinosaurs.
Bacher's revolutionary ideas touched off a firestorm of controversy and new research as paleontologists sought to bolster, discredit, or modify Bacher's assertions. The debate was scientific, at least on the surface, but it was personal too. Were the dinosaurs cold-blooded like the lowly lizard, or warm-blooded like us? Argument for argument, example for example, Bacher and his critics took the dinosaur apart and put it back together.
Now, I'm convinced dinosaurs were warm-blooded for the same series of reasons that convinced Thomas Henry Huxley in 1880 or Hermann von Meyer in 1834, and the reasons are this. If you look at dinosaur legs, and that's what impressed von Meyer, they're built for speed. They are very strong. In fact, von Meyer called the dinosaurs the pachypoda, the strong-footed animals. Dinosaurs have such big, strong legs that they must have been moving, on average, fast.
Von Meyer, who named these things pachypoda, that doesn't mean strong feet, it means thick feet. And dinosaurs had big, strong, or thick feet to support weight, and they had plenty of that. It doesn't really imply that there was any speed involved.
Number two, if you cut a dinosaur, literally, you cut dinosaur bones, and you look at them in thin section, you can take their blood pressure. The blood has rotted, and the blood vessels have rotted, but the holes left by the blood vessels preserve with great fidelity. You count those holes, dinosaur blood pressure, their blood flow rates, was way up there in the warm-blooded, hot-blooded zone.
Bacher's argument about the fine or the microscopic structure of bone indicating some kind of elaborate control of body temperature, maintaining a high and constant body temperature, I think it's probably sound.
Number 3, dinosaurs evolved very fast. Cold-blooded animals do not. The crocodiles and alligators alive today haven't changed much in 60 million years. Dinosaurs evolved very, very fast, and that's a warm-blooded property.
He says they're quickly evolving, not like crocodiles and alligators. The crocodiles and alligators are cold-blooded. Mammals are warm-blooded. Mammals are quickly evolving, in quotes. What about fish? Teleost fish. For crying out loud, that's the silliest argument I've ever heard. Teleost fish are as cold as a clam. They're not warm-blooded at all. They're one of the most rapidly evolving groups in the world today. They're evolving faster than people can study them. Now, what kind of rot is that?
Number 4, dinosaurs were in every habitat, as far north and south as there was land, including places where it was pretty cold in the winter. Tyrannosaurus rex left probably footprints in the snow in Alaska.
Bacher's argument that dinosaurs were spread all over the lot, that they occupied all continents and a variety of environments, doesn't particularly apply to whether they were warm-blooded or not, except insofar as they were able to penetrate environments that were characterized by low temperatures. Well, it's possible that such things didn't exist during the Jurassic and Cretaceous, because the geologists tell us that there were no polar ice caps during that time, and that the temperature range from the equator to pole was much smaller than it is at the present time.
And number 5, dinosaur meat eaters are nearly always incredibly rare. Nearly always. Just as rare as lions and tigers are. And that could only be because, on average, each meat-eating dinosaur needed a lot of food because it was warm-blooded. There are 5 good reasons.
If it takes 10 plant-eating critters to keep one flesh-eating critter alive, you're not going to run a railroad successfully if the numbers are the same. So Bacher's argument for a very high number of prey animals relative to the number of predators as indicating a high and constant body activity, metabolism, warm-bloodedness, if you want to say that, is probably sound.
Modern dinosaur art and the debate over warm-bloodedness are part of the newest wave of paleontology. The search for the living dinosaurs and the living world they inhabited. Paleontologist Hans-Dieter Seuss is part of an ongoing Smithsonian project called The Evolution of Terrestrial Ecosystems.
Paleontology for a long time was essentially handmaiden to the other geological sciences. Paleontologists were there to describe fossils, to use those fossils to attempt age assessments for the sedimentary rocks that contained them, and this was pretty much what paleontology was restricted to. In recent years, there's also been a new line of research that has actually started to look at animals in a way as machines. How do animals feed? How do animals move? And due to a variety of sophisticated techniques, particularly electromyography, where you actually register electrical activity patterns of muscles as they become active, say during chewing or moving, and combined with that, filming animals with X-ray pictures, so you get sort of an X-ray cineradiography. You can suddenly see bones as part of a living being, and bones are thus no longer just dead, inert objects, but are part of a living organism. And once we understand the rules and principles that underlie the bones in living animals, we can apply this knowledge to the fossil record.
But as Hans-Dieter Seuss points out,
All our new high-tech knowledge of the dinosaur is grounded on the same distinctly low-tech source.
Fossils are the only tangible line of evidence about patterns of evolutionary processes in the past. They are the only direct evidence. Everything that we know from population genetics and molecular biology is pretty much restricted to organisms that live right now. However, if we want to get the grand picture, how ecological communities came into being, how the entire biosphere developed, we really have to look at the fossil record.
I met a traveler from an antique land who said 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare. The lone and level sands stretch far away. This is all the dinosaurs left from their 140 million year reign. And for more than a century, paleontologists have dug up the West looking for fossils, mineralized bones, trying to penetrate the secrets of the dinosaurs' life and death. The Smithsonian is home to much of the collection of O.C. for Othniel Charles Marsh, heir to a fortune, Yale professor, frontier filibusterer, and paleontological plutocrat. Over a quarter century of digging, Marsh led and dispatched regiment after regiment across the West. Led by guides and scouts like Marsh's friend, William Cody, the legendary Buffalo Bill, and armed to the teeth against Indian marauders and Marsh's paleontological arch-rival, Edward Drinker Cope. Marsh, a colleague wrote, was a crack shot and a fisherman of repute, at his best around the campfire, where the swapping of tall stories is a highly appreciated art. Marsh and Cope and their followers were the lead prospectors in a bone rush, and their journals painted scenes of the adventure and discovery of the frontier. The Yale party was mounted on Indian ponies and armed with rifle, revolver, geological hammer, and bowie knife. By day, hour after hour, they marched over burning sand hills without rocks or trees or sign of water, while the thermometer stood at 110 in the shade of the wagons. It was my first visit to the far west, Marsh wrote, and all was new and strange, reminding me of mid-ocean with its long rolling waves, brought suddenly to rest. It was, in fact, the bottom of an ancient sea. A Marsh lieutenant wrote of finding dinosaur remains mingled together in the most inextricable confusion and in every conceivable position, as though in some ancient mud holes these huge monsters had become mired and died, and succeeding generations had trodden their bones down and then left their own to mingle with them. This is not the West of Marsh's time, but ours. Proctor Lake, just a few miles from Comanche, Texas, about 100 miles southwest of Dallas, whose buried fossils may hold the key to a new discovery about the dinosaurs as parents. The lure of hunting dinosaurs has not weakened in the 100 years since Marsh. And if modern explorers arrive in a pickup truck instead of on horseback, the rest of the search goes on much as it did 100 years ago. The chance to uncover what has been hidden for 100 million years, to see something that was last seen by the dinosaurs themselves, still has the power to draw people with a hankering for discovery. Like Nicholas Houghton, paleontologist, writer, dinosaur digger, and senior curator at the Smithsonian Institution. Lou Jacobs, the Southern Methodist University professor and paleontologist who heads up the Proctor Lake Project. Phil Murray, head of paleontology at nearby Tarleton State, co-sponsor of the project. Will Downs and Kent Newman, expert field paleontologists. And Dale Winkler, whom Jacobs calls the scientific brains of the operation.
Certain direction from a certain body part.
Here, Nick. Oh, wow. So here's the leg, the other one. That's a toe there.
Nicely preserved.
Yeah, we ought to get that out.
The Proctor Lake crew can see the trail of the dinosaur in what to the untrained eye is a scattering of rock.
They're pretty big. What, is that the femur we're looking at?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're starting to...
Every blow of the pick loosens a cloud of chalk dust. Working carefully and patiently with brush and awl, I uncover enough of the bone so that I can tell what I have found.
Those are the words of Charles H. Sternberg, a dinosaur hunter who worked under both Marsh and Cope. Sternberg's description is a century old, but the process of digging for dinosaurs has changed so little that it still fits.
This material, which is very familiar to most of us, is actually about as high-tech as we attain. It's called all-purpose paleontological paper. As you see, it's 2-ply. Well, it's supposed to be 2-ply. Come on, open up there. Unscented, white, and we use it to protect fossils against attrition when they're wrapped up to be shipped. It doesn't matter if you break them. What matters is if you grind them. And to keep them from being ground, we simply wrap them in paper. At this level, it's what works as counts, and this really works.
After they have been traced, a ditch is cut around them, and by repeated blows of the pick, the slab which contains them is loosened. This is then securely wrapped and strengthened with plaster.
You kind of get a feel, man, it's a lot of guesswork as to how far that specimen actually goes down. And once you think you know how far, then like right here, we decided that the bone comes down probably 6 to 8 inches. And there's no point in carrying all this extra dirt and weight, so we're going to cut all that away.
Once we flip. We got surprised last year with a couple of them because their tails just went straight down, and we started running into them as we were digging under them. So you kind of have to gauge yourself with the specimen.
Old ideas, like the one that dinosaurs abandoned their young at birth, crumble in the face of new discoveries. Could dinosaurs have been good parents?
Whatever the case, you do have to explain why there are little ones here together and what reason it was that these animals came to this site for so many, presumably thousands of years, and kept coming back. At least it tells you in this case that small ones stayed around together. Maybe because they were staying in a nesting area, and maybe because the parents were protecting them here in this area. They shouldn't have that power.
Let's do it.
Count of 3?
Okay.
1, 2, 3. Okay.
Beautiful.
Banzai!
There it is.
Perfect.
No dinosaurs in the bottom.
After the days of digging and plastering, there's time to assess the importance of what's been found.
There were plant-eating dinosaurs that reached maybe 10 or 12 feet in maximum length and stood 4 or 5, maybe 6 feet high. Unlike most of the other dinosaurs that we would find in a typical site that's down near the coast, which would be dominated by carnivorous types and much larger sauropod, brontosaurs, that sort of thing.
This has to fit into the whole paleontological and geological picture of that time. In that sequence of rocks, in other places here in central Texas, we have lots of other fossils of different kinds. And that's one of the things that makes this so amazing, because there's nothing else that's like it.
Where were the big dinosaurs? We know the
Yeah,
big
there
dinosaurs
were
were
big
around here at this time.
It beats me. Where was anybody?
Where was everybody?
Yeah,
where were the
yeah,
where were the turtles? Where were the crocodiles?
yeah.
Where were the clams? Where were the fish?
So many young are in this occurrence that we have to think in terms of what was the relationship between the parents and the young. It does seem as though there was dinosaurs, or at least some dinosaurs, exhibited a great deal of parental care. And what have we got? Well, the thing that comes to my mind is a rookery. Now, Will has said, without eggs you haven't got a rookery, and that's quite true. But we may be dealing with a rookery in a time frame after the eggs have all been hatched or destroyed, and the young are still hanging around with their parents. It's hellish hard for us as human beings to say what a dinosaur was like. We can, if we were digging up fossil horses here, we could tell you with a great deal of detail what they were like, because everybody has got a mental picture of what a horse is. Nobody has ever seen a dinosaur. Nobody's ever been as intimately associated with dinosaurs as we are with horses and cats and dogs and stuff like that there.
Dinosaur bones that start at sites like the one at Proctor Lake go here.
What I'm doing is just removing the rock off of the skeletons of these little dinosaurs so we can expose them and eventually get them out of the rock. It's just pure mechanical operation using a little pin is what we do all the fine work with. The block is from a place called Ghost Ranch in northern New Mexico. Inside the block there should be anywhere from 15 to 20 or 30 small dinosaurs, and hopefully something else besides Coelophysis, the little dinosaur, which is by far the most common animal from Ghost Ranch. You can see the skeletons come up to about this point here. When we prepare out this block, in other words, remove the rock over top of the bones, these skeletons should continue over the whole rock, and there should be about a dozen or two at least. And right here you can see the skull of a large individual animal. This is an animal that probably weighed about 50 pounds, which is pretty big for Coelophysis. And this is a reconstruction of what the little guy looked like. It's a very bird-like animal, even though if all you want to do to make this thing into a bird is put wings on it instead of the arms and eliminate the tail, and the rest of his anatomy is very much like a bird, except for a mouthful of teeth.
Alex Downs' laboratory has been designed to give museum visitors a window onto the process of uncovering dinosaurs. But behind the scenes, Smithsonian's paleontologists know a different kind of bone quarry than the one at Ghost Ranch. Like Marsh's, finding it requires not merely directions, but a native guide. Like the one at Proctor Lake, there is the feeling that what you are seeing has lain unseen and undisturbed through eons and epochs.
This is the beginning of the sauropod collection. We have some oversized sauropods. Here we have the brontosaurus claw.
This paleontological treasure trove lies not in Texas or Montana, but in the Smithsonian itself, in uncharted territory which the Smithsonian's Michael Brett Sermon knows like the back of his hand.
This is the type room of the Vertebrate Paleontology Division. A type specimen is the actual specimen used to name a new species. And in this room we have over 1,800 type specimens. One of which is this specimen here, which is the upper right arm bone of Stegosaurus sulcatus. This is the armor of Edmontonia rugosidens. Generally, armor comes in 3 different types: spikes, clubs, and plates. These are the first series of neck plates, which would sit right about here and would act as a physical deterrent. This is one of the shoulder spikes, which would first act as a visual deterrent and then as a physical deterrent. This is the original restoration of Stegosaurus ungulatus done for Professor Marsh over 100 years ago. The importance of artwork like this shows how we conceive the appearance of Stegosaurus over time. It shows what bones were available at the time of the restoration, what scientists thought the animal looked like, and it also shows the relative position and sizes of the bones for scientists who can't come look at the original material. This particular restoration shows the plates in a single row. Around 1914, another theory came along saying that the plates were in sort of a staggered alternating row. And recently, in the 1980s, the original single row theory has been resurrected again based upon new evidence. This is the skull of Ceratosaurus nasicornis Marsh, and for the past 100 years, all restorations have been based upon this one skull. This is the famous nasal horn, and this is the only known meat-eating dinosaur that has a nasal horn like this. See, the teeth are serrated on the front and the back, so it's essentially a set of double steak knives in the mouth. This is our type skull of Triceratops obtusus, which shows several interesting features. The tooth row here consists of a single set of teeth that has enamel on the inside and dentine on the outside. The enamel, being harder than the dentine, wears away at a slower rate, so this is a self-sharpening tooth. The tooth battery is oriented vertically, so the teeth don't come together as our teeth do, but they come together in a shearing plane. Triceratops is essentially the first Cuisinart. This is a brain cast of Triceratops. We've taken a skull of Triceratops and sectioned it right down the middle and peeled the halves apart so we can see the inner structure of the brain. The front is toward this area. This section of the brain is for the sense of smell. This is for hormone regulation, this is for muscle coordination, and this is for breathing and heart rate. And thinking occurred right in this area in here. It was once thought that a brain this small in an animal as large as Triceratops made these essentially very stupid animals because they were so limited in brain size. We can compare it to a similar cast of Tyrannosaurus rex. And as we could see, Tyrannosaurus has a little bit larger brain, but that's because it's a carnivore, and all carnivores have larger brains than herbivores. These are the two hands from a duck-billed dinosaur. This specimen over here is the left side where the bones are normal. This is how they normally look. On the right side, this animal has had his hand broken, and the bones have become shattered, and because they weren't reset, there's been wild, uncontrolled bone growth all throughout the sides of the bone here. And because the nearest doctor is 70 million years away, this is what happens when you sustain an injury in the Mesozoic. In this cabinet we have one of the back plates of Stegosaurus, which occurred over the legs. This is a section of the 11-foot long Camarasaurus neck. This is the first specimen ever found of Triceratops. And this is the tail spike of Stegosaurus. Imagine 4 of these waving at you.
Turning rocks into bones and bones into exhibits requires a kind of alchemy, the kind practiced in the Smithsonian's Paleo-Preparatory Lab, presided over by Arnie Lewis.
You don't come by fossils easily. That's the whole thing. They come in bits and pieces. A paleontologist may get 3 good specimens in his lifetime. I've been extremely lucky that I've been in 3 or 4 localities that had never been prospected before. And so I've seen some really good fossils.
Like Santa's elves at the North Pole, paleo-prep technicians prepare fossilized bones for exhibit and research. Paleo-prep artists create spare parts to fill in for what explorers have yet to find. And skilled, dedicated volunteers chip in for the fun of it. And you won't find a better guide than Arnie Lewis to the place where it all winds up, the Smithsonian Institution's Dinosaur Hall.
The process in getting a major mount for the Dinosaur Hall is, first of all, collecting the dinosaur. Each year you should be in the field at least a month. And back in the olden days, we were in the field about 3 months. But with that in mind, you have the specimen located in the field. You collect that specimen, and collecting a sauropod might take as much as 3 years. Then you've got 3 to 5 years of preparation that has to go on with that specimen. Then you have to research the specimen to find out how everything goes together, because they're never laid out for you well. A model has to be made of the way you think this animal might look, and like a blueprint that you can follow with the rest of your mount. The time it takes to do this might be anywhere from a year to maybe 2 years. And once you're able to move forward and put this animal together, actually it doesn't take nearly as much time as you would think. The main time has already been put into it in the thought and the preparation of the specimen. This specimen, like a Triceratops, for instance, could be armatured and put together so it stands up there in front of the public as in a matter of 6 months. Main thing, if you have structural difficulties, then you've got to look at cables and things like this, and these tend to add a little time to the specimen. But I've always felt that you could restore and mount a medium-sized dinosaur in about 1.5 years. It's time.
Here's another way to get your own personal guided tour.
Despite the impression its fearsome spikes give, Stegosaurus, in front of you, wasn't interested in attacking any animal, mammal or otherwise. A plant eater, Stegosaurus swung its tail only in self-defense. The model shown here was built in 1904 and is completely accurate, except for the placement of the largest pair of plates, which should lay behind the hip joint.
Here's Quetzalcoatlus northropi, which got its last name because it reminded the scientist who discovered it of a Northrop B-49 airplane. Now, that long, thin bill marks it as a fish eater.
How do they know?
Yeah, I want to go see that mean one over there.
These are O.C. Marsh dinosaurs, a lot of them. Stegosaurus, Diplodocus, Triceratops, and a lot more. A fitting memorial to one of the first of the great bone hunters. Artist Mark Hallett calls his painting Dawn of a New Day. And from where the tiny mammals, our distant ancestors, sat, it was dawn. But the difference between dawn and dusk is one of perspective. And from where the dinosaurs lay, the sun had set. For 140 million years, the dinosaurs had ruled the world, and the mammals had been their timid subjects. Now, the mammals were on top, and the dinosaurs had been brought low. But how? And by whom? Or what? Many of us think that it wasn't murder at all, but a kind of suicide. The dinosaurs did it to themselves. They were just too big and stupid and obsolete to stay in business. But the evidence says different.
Whatever you say about dinosaur smarts, they were certainly smart enough to give our remote ancestors a hard time, because our remote ancestors, the lineage, not the ancestors themselves, but the lineage was replaced by dinosaurs. And then for the 140 million years of dinosaur success, our ancestors were the smallest and most inconspicuous tetrapods around.
So how did the dinosaurs meet their end? What could have penetrated the Triceratops' defense, the Tyrannosaur's offense?
We're starting out with an assemblage of, say, 10 or 12 species of dinosaurs in Western North America. It doesn't take much to get rid of 10 or 12 species. Because if you're a tyrannosaur, say, as a tyrannosaur you have developed a special type of skull which is uniquely different from that of all other meat-eating dinosaurs. It's a skull that is very solid, has very strongly implanted teeth, and it has been suggested that these kinds of skulls evolved to deal particularly with one type of prey, namely the horned dinosaurs, the ceratopsians, which must have been very fearsome opponents and certainly would have put up an immense fight against being eaten by this large carnivore. So something happens to the vegetation. The ceratopsians, which have very peculiar dentitions, which suggest that they were adapted to dealing with very specific types of vegetation, disappear. Who are you going to eat? Well, okay, you say there's some more duckbills around, so maybe you can make a living on those for a while. But duckbills, again, have very specific dentitions. Since I said that there were very profound floristic changes, the duckbills may have disappeared as well. So here you have a huge 5-ton carnivore running around trying to make a living, and there's really nobody for him to pick on. Who's he going to eat? Little opossum-sized mammals that could outrun him in any case. So as a carnivore, he's suddenly up the creek because your favorite prey items have disappeared. And if you have a really substantial environmental deterioration, suddenly the ecological opportunities for all these finely attuned forms disappear, and you see a mass extinction event.
What changed the rules? What so transformed the dinosaurs' world that they could no longer survive? For years, paleontologists at museums and on college campuses traded extinction theories. Climate changes, continental movement, egg raiders, things that over tens of millions of years could spell the end of a 140 million year old race. Then in 1977, a University of California geologist, Walter Alvarez, checked a layer of Italian rock for the presence of iridium, an element rare on Earth but plentiful in outer space.
It turned out that there was a lot more iridium in this layer than we could account for, except by concluding that a lot of iridium had arrived all at once, probably as a comet or an asteroid hitting the Earth. Dust and debris thrown worldwide by the explosion that the impact causes. That dust would make it so dark that vegetation would die, it would get very cold, there wouldn't be anything to eat for large animals like dinosaurs, and that the extinction would be fundamentally due to death by starvation.
The possibility that dinosaurs had become extinct in as little as a few months imploded on the scientific community and in the mass media like a nuclear blast. Walter Alvarez didn't have to go far to find opposition to his impact theory. It was waiting for him just 3 floors below in the office of his colleague, paleontologist William Clemens.
The maps that Walter and Louis regularly use in their lectures showing the various places around the Earth where they have found iridium are impressive. But they never tell you how many places they've looked and haven't found it. And one key area in Montana where some of these animals have come from, there isn't a clay layer and there's no iridium associated with the extinction of the dinosaurs. Now, it may never have been deposited or deposited and eroded. We don't know, but it isn't there.
William Clemens had done his field work too, and he was concerned not about what he found, but what he didn't find.
These are catastrophes that, if they occurred, you'd expect to see the extinction of not only dinosaurs, but a whole variety of other plants and animals. And in the terrestrial record, we just don't see that.
Clemens and other critics claimed that Alvarez had only circumstantial evidence for his impact theory, but the chain reaction was spreading. According to one theory, it wasn't a meteorite at all that hit the Earth, it was a comet. According to another idea, the collision that extinguished the dinosaurs was just one in a series of collisions which triggered mass extinctions every 26 million years. Yet another idea came from Robert Bacher.
What killed off the dinosaurs in large part was very mundane, ordinary, earthly effects of mixing faunas. Big warm-blooded animals in particular have many diseases inside their bodies that they're co-adapted to. But you put that warm-blooded body full of diseases into a foreign environment, diseases will escape. And the biggest threats to us as a human species are exotic pests, foreign diseases, diseases that have evolved in a different animal in a different place. AIDS is an example, just the most recent example. Smallpox devastated North American Indians, many tribes. The Black Death came out of Asia somewhere and devastated Europe. Rinderpest is an Asian cattle disease that devastated African antelope. Look, at the end of the age of dinosaurs, dinosaurs were on the move. They were moving from Asia to North America. So were birds. So were other animals. That's got to cause extinction. It's got to. There would be no way to prevent it.
Obsolescence, asteroid, Death Star, epidemics, environmental changes. Which one really killed off the mighty dinosaur after an unchallenged reign of 140 million years as rulers of the Earth?
My own opinion is that all the lines of evidence indicates that there was one heck of a big event at the end of the Cretaceous, which coincided fairly closely with the extinction of a whole bunch of animals, a whole bunch of organisms, not just animals, plants as well. The evidence of, first, the iridium concentration. They are now finding tektites and evidence of collision in the forms of shock quartz and that sort of thing. It looks as sure as heck as though something happened. So yeah, my own tendency, which is sort of, I work mostly on mammal-like reptiles, and I'm kind of a sideliner in this field, but my tendency is to accept extinction as a consequence of some very unusual and nasty event, most likely a collision.
While paleontologists, expert on the ancient, debated what had happened to the dinosaurs, other scientists thought they had found a message for our times in the extinction of the dinosaurs, like a note in a bottle adrift for 65 million years.
A distinguished group of biologists was asked to examine what the consequences would be of a nuclear war that led to a nuclear winter of roughly the sort that I have described to you. The fine sooty smoke over each of the 10,000 targets would spread. The gaps between them would rapidly fill in, and the lights would dim all over the planet. Well, the biologists concluded that the net result might be not just massive deaths of plants, animals, and microorganisms, but massive extinctions of plants, animals, and microorganisms. And they said they could not exclude, under these circumstances, the extinction of the human species. And therefore, as I said before, there is no place to hide.
But there was more to come, and stranger. Some scientists think that the dinosaurs could have fallen victim to conditions that, along with nuclear winter, look eerily like horsemen of our own modern apocalypse.
If the impact was in the ocean, it would throw a great deal of water up through the atmosphere, would spread around the world. And that with all of that extra water vapor in the atmosphere, you would get a very strong greenhouse effect like we're all concerned about now in terms of carbon dioxide output. But in that case, rather than things getting cold, they would get very hot. And the temperatures might become lethal worldwide. There may have been continent-scale wildfires. And in fact, a graduate student named Wendy Wolbach at Chicago and her professor, Ed Anders, have actually found the soot from these fires now in clay layers like this from that time around the world. And they're showing that there just was an enormous amount of soot distributed. And continent-scale wildfires are clearly a serious health hazard to the animals and plants living there. And then the other mechanism, which is sort of the most gruesome of the lot, was suggested by a group of chemists at MIT. They were able to show that after a gigantic impact, as a result of nitrogen and oxygen combining, you could end up with nitric acid raining out of the sky all over the world. Now, this is an acid rain that makes our present problems look rather minimal and is very likely to have been a major contributing factor in the mass extinction.
Suppose, just suppose, that the dinosaurs hadn't died out 65 million years ago. What might have become of them? Dale Russell asked himself the same question and came up with an answer.
The Dinosauroid is an interesting thought experiment that we, a sculptor, Ron Sagan, and I tried to do. We imagined that if the planetesimal that struck the Earth had not struck the Earth at the end of the Age of Reptiles, then the Age of Reptiles would not have come to an end. Now, they would have kept on evolving. I submit that perhaps, since we are so successful, and since there is a trend on towards higher brain-body proportions through geologic time, that we are a reasonable solution to a biophysical problem. But you can't do it exactly with a dinosaur, because a dinosaur shows the effects of his genetic background. He's not the same. Our ancestors were never the same as his, so that the dinosaur's biophysical solution may not exactly duplicate ours, but it may resemble ours at least as much as a bird does a bat.
I think that whole model of Dale Russell's is fatally flawed in one respect, which is a very common assumption. If you look at any science fiction movie or any science fiction television show, you see the same thing, that any really intelligent life form somehow takes on humanoid qualities. So what he essentially did, from his knowledge of small carnivorous dinosaurs, he had one of these creatures evolve, first of all, away from carnivory towards an obviously more herbivorous diet, increase its brain size, which is no problem, but then in terms of posture and gait, he made it a bipedal, upright being.
If they did survive long enough to become intelligent, they would look like dinosaurs. They wouldn't look like this monstrosity. They would just look as they'd always looked. They'd been rather small for a dinosaur, I suppose, maybe about the size of Coelophysis, which is something on the order of 6 feet from snout to tail. They would probably stood maybe 4 feet off the ground with long hind legs and a long vertical neck. And they would have had their little grasping hands out in front, and they would be able to move that head around anywhere they wanted to. And they looked like, and they'd had a long tail to counterbalance the rest of this contraption, just as all dinosaurs do.
The Dinosauroid may owe as much to art and imagination as it does to science, but what else do we have? The last dinosaurs died 65 million years ago and left no survivors. Or did they? The pterodactyl has a familiar look. Close, as Nick Houghton would say, but no cigar. The pterodactyls were lizards, not birds. They died when the dinosaurs died, 65 million years ago.
But look again.
Archaeopteryx, 160 million years ago, the forerunner of the birds which fill our skies today. A dinosaur no bigger than a crow. Archaeopteryx couldn't fly with the ease and grace of today's birds, but its feathers allowed it to climb, glide, and with great effort, fly. And 65 million years ago, when the Great Dying felled the massive Alamosaurus, the fearsome Tyrannosaurus rex, and the heavily fortified Triceratops. The tiny birds, descendants of Archaeopteryx, survived, like mysterious survivors of Custer's Last Stand. But the birds aren't really the sole survivors of the kingdom of dinosaurs. For in the red Texas clay, yielding up only grudgingly its trove of ancient secrets, in the acres of shelves and cabinets which lie beneath the Smithsonian, in the laboratories where scientists and technicians reclaim dinosaurs from stone, and artists turn the fossil record into vivid reality, and in the great dinosaur hall of the Smithsonian Institution, the dinosaurs still live. In reassembled skeletons, in lifelike restorations, and in the imagination of the young of all ages, for whom dinosaurs have never been more alive.
Founded in 1846, the Smithsonian Institution is now the world's largest museum and research complex. In Washington, D.C., the Smithsonian operates 13 museums, exploring an incredibly diverse range of knowledge. The wonders of planet Earth and the life it supports. The history of the United States. Magnificent works of art from this country and from around the world. And the story of human flight. Also in Washington is the National Zoo, a center for wildlife research. Elsewhere, the institution operates the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute, the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory, and the Cooper Hewitt Museum of Design in New York. You can become an associate member of the Smithsonian and receive a wide range of special benefits, including a subscription to Smithsonian Magazine. For information, write to Smithsonian Institution, Washington, D.C., 20560. The Smithsonian Institution, America's National Museum.